Welcome back, everyone, to Advancing with Watercolor. I'm Gary Tucker. I'm putting the finishing touches on a painting I call the Barista. And I'm going to use this as a subject for a topic on how to preserve the white of the paper. I was visiting this cafe in Boston, the Cafe Nero, enjoying a hot cappuccino and a croissant, as I often do, and I was looking around and thinking about a subject that would allow me to demonstrate how I use the white of the paper. And I thought for a little bit, and I noticed behind the counter there's a beautiful espresso machine and lots of things sitting on the counter. I thought this could be a great subject to show how I preserve the white of the paper with brushwork and no masking fluid. So let's get to it. I begin this painting with a large brush, and the sheet of paper is roughly 11 by 14, but I want to do a quick wash to isolate the whites. The brush that I'm using is about 1.5 inches wide, and I'm working with a fairly light tone in a sepia. This is going to be practically the only color that I use. I might introduce a little black, but my primary goal in this early stage is to isolate the whites, and you'll notice I'm adjusting the sepia as well. This is happening on the fly so that I can measure the sort of dark quality against the white of the paper. This is a different way than working with the masking fluid because I have to be really conscious of the edges of my main shapes, and it's become a method that I like to work with because a couple reasons really. One is I can adjust on the fly. I can make adjustments to the shapes or the strength of the tone or other variables as the painting moves along. In other words, becomes quite plastic. And I stay with this big brush for quite a while, defining the major shapes and adjusting those shapes. I use a little bit more sepia because as this painting dries, I notice it's getting lighter. That's one of the challenges with watercolor, is to keep it, to be able to measure the dark against the light. And it's a thing that we sort of learn to predict based on the consistency of the paint and the way that it's moving across the page. When it's thick as it is now, I know it's going to register pretty dark, and that's something that I'm looking for. This is the big midtone, and what I mean by that is I'm referring to the strength of the darkness of the sepia that I'm using and how it kind of rides right up against the white. It occupies probably 3/4 of the painting, maybe even more when I start to add the darker tones into the whites. But it's important to set up this feeling of the interior. And so even though this is kind of an early stage in the painting, I take quite a bit of time manipulating that big tone and creating the sort of dark, rich quality that I want in the final piece. That's something that I'm really hoping to get, is the feeling of the interior that's illuminated through artificial light and casting a nice glow onto our figures that are working behind the counter. You notice I'm adding quite a few things on the counter, and at some point I start to realize, they're going to be a distraction. Do I need these? They're not going to help me. Let's get rid of them and just have a simple counter in front of the Barista. And I'm able to adjust this for a couple of reasons, I think. One is I'm not looking at an image. I'm not um, trying to replicate an image other than the sort of figures that I want with the background. And here I feel I can be very manipulative. I can adjust on the fly. I can remove something on a whim or add something on a whim. And for that reason, I really like to work without a lot of reference in front of me. I find my habit when I have a reference is to become sort of obsessive about it. So I get to know my subject, and then I perform my subject as you see now. I've moved over to this fine Sabelette brush because I really like the tip. The way the tip gives me a sort of a bouncy quality to the line, a sort of animated quality. And I'm introducing darker, thicker paint, the sepia, and I'm going to start to weave that in and out of the figures and into the background, defining cups and even take it into the figures. You see me now painting the vest, and I'm going to be spending a little time with this Sabelette to define my center of interest. The center of interest for me is this barista who's filling up a coffee cup in front of the espresso machine behind. So I'm taking a little bit of time here. I have my hand way down on the brush so that I can get a little more control. And I'm defining the whites even further. I'm refining the whites just by placing darks on top of them and trying to bring out the basic shapes of the white shirt, the white cup that he's pouring into, a tray of sorts, the face of the espresso machine. Those are major parts for me and this image. And then I continue to work outward. So I'll take this same dark and start to weave it into the periphery, weave it into the foreground, into the barista that's working away, and continue that until the darks start to become connected. Well, here's a favorite tool of mine is this spray bottle. I use it to provoke the watercolor. When the watercolor is starting to dry and I feel that it's giving me some edges that I don't want, or I want to just, soften a passage, that spray bottle comes in very handy. It's a bit tricky to use because it's easy to go overboard and wash out a section, but I've grown accustomed to use it. And yes, this is the big wide brush again because I want to, again, adjust this value as the painting is starting to tighten up and starting to reveal itself. I realize that an added dark is going to benefit the whole painting, and I'm pretty generous with it, as you can tell. I'm carrying it to the lower foreground. Any hint of those things on the countertop is gone now, and I can really focus on the lights and the figures and bring them to life by adding a few details here and there and really shaping that back midtone and the front midtone. The painting is dried up a bit, and I'm starting to use my Sabelette, an older Sabelette that's a bit worn, and I want to do some dry brush through the shelving in the back and through the lights in the top and create the feeling that something's in the back. And yeah, I'm starting to see the final image in my mind's eye, which gives me a lot of satisfaction because I can kind of now work towards finishing that. It means, of course, some details in my center of interest. It means lifting a few parts, adjusting a few parts. But at this point, I'm really comfortable and moving with ease, and adding and stepping back, adding and stepping back, and really enjoying this process. So this is another way to work with the white of the paper. It's not a very orthodox way. I don't think many people work this way, but I really like to see the whites in front of me and be able to paint on the fly, adjust on the fly, refine the painting as it comes to a conclusion. Take down our paper, 9 by 12 small sheet.